Hello, Deadgrinners. This is Deadgrin, and welcome to Deadgrinner Presents. I'm going to read a poem, or a story rather, that I wrote almost 10 years ago. It is entitled Legend of the Black Revolver. A group of men huddled about a campfire, singing songs and telling stories to pass the time on a cold autumn night. The strange hooting of desert owls within the darkness kept the group restless. They spoke of where they had come from and what they had left behind. All 6 men had lit a chuck for California. And that's why I left. What can I say, fellers? Sometimes you don't know what's coming. Can't do anything about that, am I right? Finished Josias. Each of the men had spoken, all except the silent graybeard whom had spent his time cleaning his Navy Colt revolver. Josias had noticed and had grown tired of the old man's piece. Come on, Gideon. That gun ain't getting any cleaner. Don't you know any song or a story? A man that has lived as long as you have has to have a story damn near carved into his memory. Curious old nights like this? A ghost story would fit the mood just fine. The old man raised his heavy brows, but never looked up. Just might, said Gideon in his chest. He finally looked up and stared deep into the weary eyes of his companions. Have any of you boys heard the legend of the Black Revolver? The baffled group fired questioning eyes at each other and confessed to know nothing of the sort with defeated shrugs. Gideon smiled. Just know that what I'm about to relate is a true story. One I find hard to believe myself. Once there was a man called the Hessian. I don't know his real name nor why they called him that, but what I do know is that he was an outlaw, a brutal, chaotic kind of a man, if you could call him a man. He lived for the savagery of these lands. This is the kind of man that proves beyond the doubt that man, no matter how civilized we may think he is not too far off from his primal roots. Nevertheless, the Hessian was always the victor in a fight, no matter what the situation or whom was at the end of his 6-shooter. The Hessian took considerable pride in that gun. He made sure he cleaned it right before a robbery. The son of a bitch would make it shine like the sun, they'd say. Someone once wrote in a local paper that ugly man took everything the bank could hold, but what a gun. And it was that pride that ultimately made the Hessian identifiable. The law began to track him. But the day came, as with most outlaws, when he was finally captured. A group of Texas Rangers ambushed him while he slept. You see, the Rangers knew. They knew that the Hessian could have taken them all straight to hell. So they waited till he slept before they snuck up on him. For his crimes, they would not hang him by his neck, no, not the Hessian. Instead, they decided to burn him alive. As they set him up for his blazing demise, he smiled at each ranger, cursing them, forsaking their deeds. In the end, all that was left was a pile of charred bones and black ash. Having done what they had set out to do, the lawmen got their horses and went on their way. One ranger, the youngest in the bunch, was disturbed by what he had done and turned one last time to see the remains. He was shocked to see a great figure in black Death himself, he'd go on to say, reached down into the pile of ashes and unearthed the Haitian's prized revolver. It looked different, stained in a lusterless black, more like the ghost of a gun, if such a thing is possible. The ranger told the others to turn back and see the dark stranger, but whatever it was had simply vanished. Only thing stranger than that was when they searched through the remains, they couldn't find no gun. From that day on, there had been stories and whispers about an unusual black revolver. Stories of duels, bank robberies, murders, but they all ended the same. Whoever was at the wrong end of that barrel never walked away. Any man with that kind of power might find himself lucky, but this gun deals both ways. I've heard that the possessor eventually dies. They may be slain in their sleep, perish due to natural causes, or simply aren't heard from again. Somehow, though, the gun is passed along. I never really believed the grim whispers, that is, until I found myself in the right place at the wrong time. A friend and I had ended up in the cantina in Dolboros, Texas, a couple of months back. A drunkard sat at that bar that day and kept talking about the accuracy of the gun in his possession at the time. He wouldn't shut up about it, kept bragging and showing us this oddly stained revolver. We didn't know if it was the whiskey talking or if it was just plain lies. A tall man in black, Spanish by the look of it, sat in a table behind the drunkard. They had their backs to each other. In the midst of the drunkard's slurred speech, the tall man suddenly rose from his seat, turned, pulled the black revolver from the drunkard's own holster, shooting him on the back of his head, and walked out. Each of the men drew closer to Gideon, not wanting to miss a word. A strange yowl of a coyote in the distance frightened some of the men. Josias pulled his effects closer as he looked around the shadow-ridden desert. How do you know it was the same gun? Josias finally asked. Not 1 month later, I heard a house burned down near Dolboros. A thief named Jeffrey Matheson passed through and found a black gun in the ruins. Went down to Waynetown, or so a friend told me. Josias, didn't you and Paco go down that way before meeting up with us? Maybe, answered Josias. Anyhow, the boy died not 2 days later. Where the gun is now, who knows? Sometimes, my friends, you know what's coming, but you don't do anything about it. Men who own that gun learn the hard way. I will say this. If you boys ever find yourselves at the wrong end of a black revolver, you best pray to God it ain't the black revolver. Bang! A single shot rang out from a freshly cleaned gun, sending the men scattering into the night. Gideon burst into laughter as he saw the men stumbling through cacti and dry brush. Come on, fellers, I was just fooling with you. Come on back. Gideon continued cackling and looked around the campfire, but his eyes couldn't pierce the night. He saw no one, and the night grew silent. Now come on back, fellers. I didn't mean anything by it. The sound of rolling thunder seemed distant but approaching. Gideon looked at the night sky and saw nothing but twinkling lights amongst the darkness. Run! Yelled one of the men, rushing towards him with horror in his eyes. Gideon, run! Before the old man had time to react, his comrade fell to the ground, a hatchet protruding from the back of his head. As he got up, Gideon felt the clean point of an arrow piercing just under his ribs. He dropped his gun and fell to one knee. A Native American jumped from his horse and drew a handmade knife. Red paint adorned the face of the stranger, and he ended the life of the dying man. The Native American group dragged their victims back to the campfire as Gideon's slayer raised his cephalic prize. They searched through the bags, rating what they found valuable. The stranger with red paint looked through Josiah's bag and pulled out an oddly stained revolver. He instructed his men to line the victims up side by side, for he wanted to test the accuracy of his new gun. Hey guys, this is Deadgrinner. I hope you enjoyed tonight's tale. If you did like it, please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, and make sure you press that notification bell to be alerted on any upcoming videos in the future. Please make sure to visit the Franken Culture website and explore. There are other contributors with many more content at frankenculture.com. Follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And like I always say, guys, if you guys are watching this in the morning, good morning. And for everybody else, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.